Thank you, everyone. Welcome to Why Rabies is the Coolest Disease, the unbiased perspective of me, someone who has never and hopefully will never see rabies. I want to begin with a little bit of recognition, a little bit of an acknowledgement, because I have a feeling that I'm not the only nerd in the room tonight. Can I get a little bit of a cheer if anyone else here happens to be a nerd? I had my suspicions. I suspect I am also not the only medical nerd in the room, so I want to recognize that there are lots of cool diseases. Prion diseases are incredibly fascinating. Fungal diseases are niche and weird. Bacterial diseases are so diverse, and viruses, I'm very happy to say, had a strong representative here tonight. However, there are many good reasons why rabies deserves the proverbial crown or cool kid sunglasses of world's coolest disease. I'm Zoe. I'm a veterinary nurse. I work a lot in animal anesthesia, and for the last 5 years I've been working with dogs and cats and with exotics, some of the beautiful little cuties you can see on the screen here. I'm also very passionate about medical history. I think it is fascinating how we managed to get from the humoral theory of disease or the miasma theory of disease to the incredible medicine that we're able to practice today. We have a long way to go, but we've done some pretty incredible work. It's really interesting. When you start a talk like this, it's considered ideal to give a little bit of a personal story of what makes you connect to this topic, which is a bit of a weird thing to do for rabies. However, I do have a story. When I was 18, I decided to horrify the doctors in my life and go on a trip to India. India is an incredible country and I cannot recommend it more highly. However, it is quite a small country and is responsible for 30 to 40% of the rabies deaths worldwide every year. So rabies is a very, very big deal there. My doctors were particularly horrified because I am a big needle phobe. I spend all day stabbing all manner of animals, but the moment the needle is pointed at me, I am terrified. So my doctor said to me, "Zoe, we want you to get the rabies vaccine. It is 3 shots, terrifying. It often has some pretty nasty side effects, and it is hundreds of dollars." And 18-year-old Zoe said, "Please let there be an alternative." So they said, "Zoe, you don't have to get the rabies vaccine on the condition that you do not touch any of the dogs in India. No street dogs, no adorable puppies. You absolutely cannot touch any dogs." And you had better believe that this was me. With every single street dog that I could find, there were so many puppies, they were so freaking cute, and I have no regrets, and I'm very lucky that I did not die of rabies. So, we all probably have a bit of a gist of what rabies looks like. It is a person, maybe a raccoon, maybe a dog that is rabid. They are tremoring, they're frothing at the mouth, they are absolutely terrifying. They're running about the town trying to bite anyone and anything that they can find. That's pretty much it. So, we have been terrified of rabies for millennia. For at least 4,000 years, we have been basing the stories that terrify humans the most on rabies. Werewolves are a bit of a slam dunk here. You're bitten by a dog/person, and then you become this insomniac, this tremoring, tormented, bestial creature that's frothing at the mouth and baring its teeth, going around trying to bite everything else. Vampires are also insomniacs, and they are terrified of water. The historical name for rabies was hydrophobia, hydro meaning water and phobia meaning fear. We've got vampires scared of holy water. I think that checks out. We also know that vampires have a strong affinity for bats, and bats are a key carrier of rabies. My personal favourite is zombies. So in a zombie apocalypse, you have got all of these people walking around carrying this virus that if they bite you, there is a 100% chance that you are going to come down with that disease. It removes your ability to think. You have these hallucinations. You forget your family and friends. You just become this violent vessel for the spread of the disease. And that is what virus rabies does to people. So let's get into our basic rabies facts. This is going to lay the foundation for the rest of the presentation tonight. Rabies comes from the Latin to rage. It is a virus, which I'm very happy that we have had some little explanations of viruses tonight. It is a bullet-shaped virus in the Lyssavirus family. There are lots of little images of rabies throughout this presentation because it is an incredibly beautiful thing under a microscope, in my unbiased opinion. A virus is a simple, non-living organism, so it can't survive outside of the nice, warm, squishy bodies of humans, dogs, cats, etc. Rabies in particular only survives around 24 to 48 hours on surfaces. Transmission. It is transmitted by saliva, and in the case of humans, it's about 99% of the time that dogs are to blame because they do a beautiful job of being man's best friend. And our outcome. So once you start showing those symptoms, once you have got the tremoring, the hydrophobia, and that intense, violent, unpredictable nature, there is absolutely no hope for you. So once you get to that point, we're calling it there. You can't actually come back from that. It's pretty intense stuff. The pathophysiology of rabies is how it gets from a dog through a bite into making you into that creepy zombie that we've talked about, and it is absolutely fascinating. First step is you are bitten. In the case of humans, it's usually a dog and it's usually on the leg. Rabies jumps straight from the saliva into your muscle cells, where it builds up a little bit of an army for a couple of days. Then it makes the jump from your muscle cells to your nerves, and it climbs up your body towards your spinal cord and your brain at this creepily measurable rate of 8 to 20 millimeters a day. The cool thing about that is that where you're bitten decides how long it's going to take for you to show symptoms. So if you're bitten on the nose, a day or two, you're rabid. If you are bitten on your toe, it can take weeks to months to climb its creepy way up your body and into your brain. Once it's there, it targets areas that are responsible for behavior change. So memory, or basically any area that makes you into a predictable, well-functioning human, it attacks and meddles with. Once it is thoroughly through your brain, it heads towards your salivary glands. And that's where we get the classic symptom of rabies, that like overproduction of saliva, the creepy frothingness, and that kind of pouring out of the mouth. That is because your saliva is full of rabies and it does not want to be digested by your stomach acid. It doesn't want to be diluted by water. It wants to get out. And that's how we get our hydrophobia. It's gone brain, salivary glands, and then all the muscles in your throat that are responsible for swallowing. So the reason that these patients exhibit hydrophobia is because if they attempt to drink a glass of water, they have this horrific cramping and almost this feeling of choking. And that is why they are terrified of water. Combine all those things together and you have a really epic transmission potential for rabies. You cannot swallow it, you cannot dilute it, and you have this incredibly unpredictable behavior and inherent violence in the disease. Final step, you die. There is no way for me to get around that. You get encephalitis, you go into a coma, and then cardiorespiratory arrest is the ultimate outcome of rabies. In a little bit of a summary of pathophysiology, we have got rabies, which is this teeny tiny thing here. It is a non-living virus. It can't survive on a surface. It can't survive without you, a nice squishy host. They aren't even a single-celled organism, which is something us science nerds tend to use to explain how simple something is. Rabies is even simpler than that. It's just RNA in this cool little protein shell. However, that does not stop it from creepily climbing up your nerves towards your spinal cord and brain. It does not stop you from turning into this nocturnal, flesh-eating zombie who can't even recognize the people around you. It turns off that part of your brain, so you are completely incapable of functioning as a normal member of society. It ensures its own survival by stopping you from swallowing it and from diluting it with water. Now, I know what you're thinking. Zoe, this is all very cool. I love pathophysiology, but what is cool about rabies on a microscopic level? I want to take a tiny moment to admire this image of rabies under a microscope. As soon as I saw this, I thought about how, when people have a beach house up above the couch, they have an image of kind of water washing onto a beautiful beach. And I was like, that's basically this. This is rabies washing onto human cells. In order to understand why rabies is so cool microscopically, you need to lock in on how absolutely tiny it is. So if you think of a single cell, that is one of the smallest things that we can imagine. Rabies looks absolutely tiny next to that. If you think of what makes up your brain and spinal cord, you've got all these neurons, particularly interneurons. They've got the kind of receiving end, they have this long noodly bit in the middle, and then they have the head of the cell. That tiny thin noodly bit in the middle is called the axon, and that is rabies inside of an axon. That is how tiny we're talking. Now, we know that rabies is a virus, and you're probably thinking, so I protect myself from viruses constantly. I have had the cold, I have had COVID, I have had the flu, and I have gotten through all of this. I can handle a virus. Rabies is not just any virus. When rabies comes into your system, it doesn't move through your body through blood or the lymph system. It jumps straight from the saliva into your muscle cells. That means that the normal immune surveillance that your body is doing, it completely avoids. Once it is in those cells, your cells have systems for alerting the nucleus that there is a problem. These are called stat proteins. Very, very complex process, and rabies holds them hostage. T cells are another key part of your immune system. I had already heard of T cells because of Rent. Do I have any other Rent fans in the room? Yes! Thank you. We are really rare. T cells are a really important part of your immune system, and rabies kills them. Finally, the last option that your cells have when they are perceiving an invader that they think that they can't beat and they don't want to pass it on to their other cellular friends is apoptosis. It's a cellular suicide. They say, you know what, I don't think I'm going to fix this. I'm just going to shut it all down. Rabies turns off your cell's ability to destroy itself. It's really a common idea when you think about something as brain-altering as rabies that it's killing you by killing your brain cells. In rabies, your brain is not experiencing cell death. It is firing on absolutely all cylinders, absolutely full of rabies, which is very, very cool. So how do we protect ourselves? We have the rabies vaccine. It's 2 or 3 shots in a row. Some people get some reactions, but as far as vaccines go, it's pretty awesome. If you are unlucky enough to be bitten, around the site where you are bitten, we are going to inject something called RIG. It's rabies immunoglobulin. And those are basically cells that already know what rabies looks like, and they're going to try to bind to it before it gets into your muscle cells. Or finally, you can just live in Australia. Well done, Australia. We have no rabies here. It is wonderful to be an island. Yes. Well done, well done, well done. Now, I have now had the rabies vaccine because of my work. Does anyone know why an Australian veterinary nurse would have the rabies vaccine? Bats. Well done. So, bats in Australia have something called Australian bat lyssavirus. It is not rabies, but it is similar enough to rabies that if you have the vaccine, you get a little bit of cross protection. If you're not a fan of modern medicine, if vaccines and rabies immunoglobulin and living in Australia are not your kind of thing, you can pray to the Greek goddess Artemis. You can crush up some nuts and place them in the wound, but you must then feed them to a chicken. Or you can tie a rooster to your leg, but it is very important that it is butt to wound. Historically, there are so many examples of different physicians thinking that if you tie a chicken or a rooster to an illness, somehow its butt is going to pull the illness out of you. It's fantastic. It's so good. I love ancient medicine. Or our final ancient option is you can find the dog that bit you, cook it, rub its flesh on your teeth, and then feed that to another dog. which this dog looks absolutely overjoyed at the thought of that. Once symptoms present, rabies is always fatal. So every year it causes at least 60,000 deaths. And before we had the vaccine, it was an absolutely incredible number higher than that. Rabies is always fatal. Or is it? We considered rabies 100% fatal until very, very recently, when one girl changed it all. That girl was Gianna Geese. In 2004, she was cleaning up, she was doing a bit of a spring clean at her community church when she was bitten by a bat. A lot of people don't think about bats as a key carrier of rabies, and Gianna and her mum didn't think too much of it. They bandaged it up, went on with their days. Around a week later, she had fever and a headache. We've all had a fever and a headache before. You do not rush straight to hospital. But a week after that, she was showing our classic rabies signs. She had that slurred speech, hypersalivation, and she was terrified of water. They took her into hospital, did a test, and lo and behold, it was rabies. I've run through a few times in this presentation how once you're at this point, there is no coming back for you. Something very cool happens in medicine then. When there is a 100% chance that someone is going to die, you can kind of try whatever, because whatever you do is not going to be worse than that. And that's what the doctors did. They filled her full of ketamine and midazolam and antivirals and stuck her in a coma, and they were like, let's just see what happens. And you know what? On day 6, they tested some cells in her neck and found rabies antibodies. This is a girl who had never had the rabies vaccine and certainly didn't receive any of the follow-up care that we would need to protect ourselves. On day 10, they tried to wake her up, and it worked. On November 18th, around about 2 months after she was first bitten, she was free of rabies. At this point, she couldn't talk, she couldn't walk, and she went through a hell of a lot of rehab, but she got to go home. Let's have a little round of applause for Gianna here. She recovered so brilliantly. She went on to graduate high school, then college. She's since gone on to work and have her own children, all of whom are perfectly healthy. It is absolutely incredible. We have tried that protocol, the Milwaukee protocol, on 40 to 50 people since Gianna, and only 5 or 6 have survived. And of the people who've survived, none of them have made the level of recovery that she has. A lot of them have gone on to have physical or mental deficits that they continue to receive rehab for to this day. So we are still at a 99.99999% fatality rate, but isn't that very cool? Let's have a little round of applause for rabies here. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Now, has anyone noticed that there is something in the corner of this slide? That is a pirate holding a second place medal. And that is because I could not help but include my second favourite disease in this presentation. Does anyone know what disease pirates get? Scurvy, exactly. Now, I'm an Australian veterinary nurse. Does anyone know why an Australian veterinary nurse would know anything about scurvy? What? Can't argue with that. What common Australian household pet gets scurvy? Does anybody know? Not chickens, not dogs, not cats, not rabbits. Guinea pigs. Humans and guinea pigs and some bats are the only animals that don't make their own vitamin C. To understand how truly cool scurvies is, I want us to take a little moment. Everyone close your eyes. After enjoying this incredible meme, I was so happy when I found it. Oh my God. Close your eyes and imagine that you are on a pirate ship. It's the 1500s, the 1400s, the 1300s. It's a very, very, very long time ago. And you're on a very long ocean voyage, maybe 6 months or more. And slowly, the people around you start showing the weirdest, creepiest signs. Their eyes look sunken in their heads. Their teeth are falling out. Their gums are bleeding. Then, wounds that healed years ago reopen. Bones that had broken 5-10 years prior re-break. That is what scurvy does to the body. So it is no wonder that everyone came to the conclusion that this is a very, very, very scary ocean curse. I think that is a perfectly valid conclusion to come to with the evidence that they had. However, we get a little later in the world and we start investigating things with science. Is this a bacterial infection? Is this a virus? Could this be a dietary disease? And so we start feeding a pirate's diet to pigeons. We called this a scurvy-inducing diet. It's got no vitamin C, and no matter how long they fed it to pigeons, they did not come down with scurvy. So we're nearly going back to our this is a creepy ocean curse thing, but just before that, they were like, let's try feeding this to guinea pigs. Now, thank goodness they chose guinea pigs, because if they hadn't, it would have set back ocean medicine for hundreds of years, most likely. But when they fed the guinea pigs this scurvy-inducing diet, you'd better believe they got scurvy. These guinea pigs come in, and I see them in clinic. They come in and all their hair is falling out. Their bones are weirdly brittle. They're not doing well at all until you feed them vitamin C. Does anyone know? Does anyone know the scientific term for vitamin C? It's a Latin term, ascorbic acid. Thank you very much. That brings us to the final fun fact I want to share with you tonight. Ascorbic acid is a Latin term. The start of the word is a, which means not or anti, and the second part of the word is scorbic, which means scurvy. So vitamin C is literally called the anti-scurvy acid. Thank you, everyone.
Alrighty. How great was that? I don't think I'm convinced still though. I'm a prion guy myself.
Oh, prions are pretty fucking cool.
Questions for Zoe. My eyesight. Yes, right here.
Hi, it was a great talk.
Thank you.
I had a question. Once rabies is made it into the muscle cell, when it's inhibiting STAT, it's inhibiting apoptosis and it's killing the T cells. It only encodes like 5 proteins. How is it doing it?
Do you need to repeat the question?
Yeah, can you repeat the question though? Because I got lost, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. The question, I think, was when rabies it's in the saliva, it's in the wound, and it's jumped into the muscle cells, you asked about any excess proteins that it might make?
No, like when it's inhibiting the STAT, it's inhibiting the apoptosis.
Yes.
Killing the T cells.
Yes.
It only encodes 5 proteins in its genome. How is it doing all of that with 5 proteins?
Yeah, okay. A very simple summary of that question would be, how the heck does rabies do this when it is so incredibly simple? It's just made of 5 proteins encased in that bullet-shaped cell. The answer is, I don't know. I truly don't know. I'm not a virologist, but boy, I would love to know.
Maybe circle back. I think you will quickly Google it. Question all the way up here at the back.
The question was, shall we start branding baby rabies viruses Ray Babies? And I said, that sounds like a brilliant marketing campaign. Not that rabies needs it, it's doing pretty well on its own, but I'll get it to come straight to you, Shanam, if it needs any help.
Well, okay. One right here. Ooh, can you amputate it
so
off?
happy you asked this question. This is one of my favorite facts. Thank you so much. The question is, if you're bitten by rabies on your toe or on your foot, can you just cut it off before it's done that creepy climb into your brain? And the answer is yes, which is so cool. Isn't that fantastic?
So that's like plan C.
Yeah. That's like if I was back like hundreds of years ago prior to vaccines and I was bitten by a rabbit dog on my toe, I'm definitely cutting off that toe, and you will be like, not fine, but you'll be pretty good. You'll be better than dead.
I feel like I'd just chop it off.
Yeah.
I'd be like, first protocol, I don't need this toe, it's gone. Question right here.
When people take their animals overseas or they bring animals here and they get quarantined for months and months, is that just because of rabies?
Yeah, it is in large part because of rabies. So the question was, when animals are travelling in or out of Australia and they need to go through quarantine, is that because of rabies? And the answer is in large part, yes. So it's actually quite hard in my clinical work when people call and they want a rabies vaccine for their dog, because it's very uncommon for Australian vet clinics to have that vaccine because we don't have rabies here. But yeah, when people travel, that is one of the rare circumstances where we order in the rabies vaccine just for that particular animal so that they can travel to wherever they need to go to.
So question just here.
Do you have worse outcomes for getting treatment if you're shorter?
Is there worse outcomes if you're shorter? I guess you'd have less time.
You have less time. Yeah. So you'd really want to be as tall as humanly possible and as far from the bite location as humanly possible.
So in like a rabies outbreak, we're just going to send like the basketball players in.
Yeah,
You guys
exactly.
deal with it.
Exactly.
Yes, one right here.
How much time does a rabies vaccine buy you?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. The question was, how much time does the rabies vaccine buy you? Potentially your whole life. So there are lots of different categories of what we do with someone if they're bitten by an animal with rabies. Your worst case scenario is someone's bitten by an animal with rabies and they've never had the rabies vaccine before. So that person gets like at least 3 shots of the rabies vaccine in their arm to protect their central nervous system and basically teach that nervous system what rabies looks like so it can hopefully bind to it and get rid of it. But they also get a hell of a lot of injections of that rabies immunoglobulin around the site, so that, we have cells there that know what rabies looks like. They bind to it, they get rid of it before it gets into your muscle cells. If you have already had the rabies vaccine before, you may or may not need more rabies vaccines injections for your central nervous system. So you might just need the immunoglobulin around the site, or if you have no access to immunoglobulin, you might be okay. Is kind of the difference. So that's part of why I didn't get the rabies vaccine when I went to India, because I knew that if I was bitten by a rabid dog, I was going to have to get way more needles anyway. So I was like, why would I get needles now and then need more if I'm going to get bitten? So I just took my chances and I'm still here. And I'm not very tall, so I didn't get bitten by a dog with rabies.
Are there any questions that I've been missing consistently? I think Wade?
Why is it still around? Like, how does it persist?
Yeah, so that was a great question, and Emma's talked about that a little bit before, about viruses that kill the host are not the cleverest of virus because they're killing the very thing that's meant to transport them. And I think the way that rabies gets around this is just the degree of uninhibited violence that it brings out in animals. One of the scariest videos I've ever seen is a video of a cow with rabies, and this thing is absolutely wild. It's terrifying. And so I think because we have that, 1 week or so window of really aggressive spread, that's how rabies is able to kind of keep around despite all our efforts. The other key part of that is that humans can eradicate diseases if they only are carried by humans. Whereas if they have an animal carrier like bats, it's really hard to get out there and vaccinate every single bat. And so that's part of why rabies is still around, is it's not just us, it's in a hell of a lot of animals.
Okay, a few more questions popped up. I think this person at the back I might have missed a few times.
Oh, I couldn't quite hear you there, sorry. Yeah, the question is, are you immune 100% after the vaccine? So It's it's kind of situation where we don't really want to test that, and so we give you the immunoglobulin and more vaccine anyway because it's a really risky game that we're playing. I am 100% sure that there are going to be cases out there where people have had the rabies vaccine, bitten by a rabid animal, they get no other treatment, and they still survive. But if we know you've been bitten by a rabid animal, we tend to do all those extra steps just to be safe.
I think there were two more. You first.
A lot of diseases that are carried by animals can't infect humans or because different animals are very different. But you've just listed a whole bunch of animals that don't get rabies.
Yeah. Yeah.
General.
Yeah. Thank you for asking. So the question was about the number of animals that rabies can infect. And something that I found really cool about researching this is one of the other reasons we don't have rabies in Australia is because our animals, like our kangaroos and our platypi and our echidnas, their body temperature is not quite right for rabies. Whereas ours and dogs and cats, they're all quite similar, and rabies can survive very happily in us. In Australia, yeah, a lot of our native animals, I believe it's slightly too low, their temperature sits, so that it's not ideal for rabies. So there are some animals that are at a much lower risk for rabies.
Yeah, and okay, there's two more. Yes, you hear.
Do humans actually get like animalistic and demonic?
Yeah. Yeah. So the question was, do humans get that animalistic, demonic look? And we absolutely do, in a big, really scary way. If you want to be really creeped out, you can look at videos on YouTube of people that have rabies, and they're in a hospital setting. They need to be like tied to a bed and put into a coma because, yeah, they're actually incredibly dangerous. Yeah.
And last question, I believe, is all the way over here.
Wonderful question. So the question was, are there any pre-existing conditions that someone could have that could make rabies more dangerous to them? I've not seen any studies on that. I don't think so. Like, I can imagine maybe if you have some kind of interesting nerve condition, maybe there's going to be one of them that's particularly handy for rabies to make its way up there. But I don't know. I haven't seen any research on it.
All right. Yeah, I think that's all of the questions. Give Zoe another round of applause.